Fear. It is a shadow that trails us from the moment we become aware of the world around us. It whispers to us in moments of uncertainty, chills our bones when we face the unknown, and sometimes it grips us so tightly that we freeze, unable to move forward. Yet fear is not our enemy. It is a part of us, woven into the fabric of our instincts, meant to protect, to guide, and, at times, to motivate. But what happens when fear grows too large, when it becomes a barrier rather than a guide? What is the secret to defeating fear, and how can that secret transform our lives? Let me share with you the story of a young man named Samuel, whose life was shaped by fear from a very early age. Samuel grew up in a small town, nestled between towering mountains and dense forests. The world beyond his home always seemed vast and intimidating. As a child, he was timid, shying away from new experiences, hesitant to speak up in class and wary of making new friends. The unknown frightened him, and so he built a small, safe world for himself, a world with strict boundaries, where nothing unexpected could happen. Samuel's parents, loving and kind, tried to encourage him to step outside his comfort zone. They enrolled him in sports, invited neighbors for play dates, and gently coaxed him to explore. But Samuel's fear was stubborn. Every time he faced a challenge, his mind filled with anxious thoughts. What if I fail? What if I fall? What if people laugh? And so he retreated, choosing the comfort of solitude over the risk of embarrassment. As Samuel grew older, the world demanded more of him. High school brought new social circles, public speaking assignments, and the pressure to participate. Fear became an even heavier burden. Samuel watched as his classmates seized opportunities, joining clubs, leading teams, making friends, while he remained on the sidelines, invisible, unnoticed. One day, Samuel's English teacher, Mrs. Bennett, announced a school-wide storytelling contest. The winner would present their story in front of the entire school. The announcement triggered a familiar wave of dread in Samuel. The thought of standing alone on a stage, all eyes on him, was unbearable. He decided almost instantly that he would not participate. Yet, Mrs. Bennett saw something in Samuel, a quiet curiosity, a spark of imagination. After class, she approached him and said, "Samuel, I believe you have a story to tell. Will you consider entering the contest?" Samuel shook his head, mumbling something about not being brave enough. Mrs. Bennett smiled gently and told him a secret that would change his life. She said, "Fear is not meant to stop us. It is meant to show us that something matters. If you feel afraid, it means you care. The secret to defeating fear is not to fight it, but to understand it, and then to act anyway." The words lingered in Samuel's mind for days. He thought about all the moments he had let fear dictate his actions, all the opportunities he had missed. He realized that while fear had protected him from discomfort, it had also shielded him from growth, joy, and connection. Inspired, Samuel decided to write his story. At first, the fear was overwhelming. His hands trembled, his heart raced, and doubts crowded his mind. But he remembered Mrs. Bennett's advice. Understand it, and act anyway. So, he sat down and began to write, pouring his heart onto the page. He wrote about his life, about growing up afraid, about wanting to change. He wrote about his parents, his teachers, and his small, safe world. And most importantly, he wrote about the moment he decided to face his fear. As the day of the contest arrived, Samuel felt the familiar grip of anxiety. He considered backing out, but he remembered why he was doing this, not to win, not to impress, but to prove to himself that he could act in spite of fear. When his name was called, Samuel walked onto the stage, his knees shaking. He looked out at the sea of faces, took a deep breath, and began his story. At first his voice was soft and uncertain, but as he spoke, something remarkable happened. The crowd listened, captivated by his honesty and vulnerability. Samuel's fear did not vanish, but it became something else, a source of energy, a sign that he was alive and growing. When he finished, the auditorium erupted in applause. Samuel felt a rush of pride, not because he had conquered fear, but because he had learned to live with it. That day marked a turning point in Samuel's life. He began to seek out challenges, no longer avoiding the things that frightened him. He joined clubs, made new friends, and even volunteered to lead projects. He discovered that every time he acted in spite of fear, he grew stronger, more confident, and more capable. The secret, Samuel realized, is not that fear disappears. It never does. Not completely. The secret is that we can choose to act anyway. We can recognize fear not as a signal to stop, but as a sign that something important is at stake. Fear means we are stepping into new territory, pushing past old limits, and reaching for something greater. Over time, Samuel learned to see fear as a companion. He welcomed its presence, knowing that it would always be there when he faced the unfamiliar. But now, instead of letting it hold him back, he let it guide him toward growth. He understood that every great accomplishment, every meaningful connection, every moment of joy lies just beyond the wall of fear. This lesson is universal. Whether you are afraid of speaking in public, starting a new job, moving to a new city, or simply trying something you've never done before, fear will always show up. But it is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that you are alive, that you care, and that you are on the verge of something transformative. So the next time you feel fear's cold grip, pause and listen. Ask yourself, what is it that I care about? What opportunity lies beyond this fear? Then, take a small step forward. Write the story, make the call, try the new thing. You do not need to be fearless to succeed. You only need to be brave enough to act. As Samuel's story shows, the secret to defeating fear is not in erasing it, but in embracing it, and then moving forward, one step at a time. When you do, you will discover a life that is richer, fuller, and more extraordinary than you ever imagined. And in the end, you will find that the greatest rewards are waiting for those who dare to face their fears and act anyway.